Hey there, before we dive in, a quick note. This podcast is an experiment in AI. Both the co-hosts and the entire conversation you're about to hear are generated by AI technology based on content and ideas owned by Danny Brown. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this unique AI-powered experience.
Ever feel like you're shouting into the void with your podcast? You put so much into each episode, but how do you get people to actually listen?
It's a question every podcaster asks themselves.
Exactly. So today's deep dive is all about maximizing growth with the right call to action.
And we're talking about just one simple ask that can make all the difference.
I love shortcuts.
Who doesn't? Look, you can spend hours agonizing over algorithms or chasing Apple Podcast reviews.
Oh yeah, I've been down that rabbit hole.
But building a loyal listener base often comes down to a surprisingly straightforward approach.
Okay, before you say it, I know what you're thinking. Just tell people to share the show.
Right? You read my mind.
It sounds almost too easy.
I know it does.
But the source we're diving into today makes a really interesting case for why this strategy is so powerful.
What I find fascinating is the psychology behind it. We see marketing messages everywhere, constantly. But when someone we trust recommends something.
Like a friend can't stop raving about their new favorite podcast.
Exactly. We're far more likely to actually listen.
It's like word of mouth, but for the podcasting world, feels way more genuine.
Exactly. And this organic growth, fueled by personal recommendations, it can actually have a much bigger impact than, say, obsessing over Apple Podcast reviews.
Speaking of which, this deep dive busts some major myths about those reviews. I always thought they were the key to, climbing those podcast charts.
It's a common misconception. In reality, their impact isn't as direct as many people believe. Apple themselves has actually clarified that ratings and reviews can help listeners after they found a podcast to decide whether to listen.
Okay, so they matter for that initial should I listen decision.
Right. But they don't actually influence chart rankings or search results.
Really? So how do we get those rankings up?
Well, that's where that simple ask comes in.
So if those shiny reviews aren't the magic bullet, what is? This whole simple ask thing better be good.
Oh, it is. The source really zeroes in on this. They say we should ditch those complicated calls to action and just ask one thing directly. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with others you feel would enjoy it too.
There is something powerful about keeping it simple. But wouldn't it be better to be more specific? Like leave a review on Apple Podcasts or tell your friends on social media.
I hear you. And while those actions definitely have their place, we'll circle back to those, but this particular ask, it taps into something much more powerful, genuine enthusiasm.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Think about it. If you really connected with this episode, wouldn't you naturally want to share it with someone you knew would feel the same?
Totally. This is way more about genuine sharing and less about, checking off a box.
Exactly. And get this, you can tailor the ask to your specific listeners. Let's say your podcast is about, underwater basket weaving.
Okay, I like where this is going.
You could say something like, if you know a fellow basket weaver who needs some underwater inspiration, share this episode with them.
Now that's how you target an audience. And think about it, the more people share it, the further your reach goes, like a chain reaction, all from that one authentic request.
Exactly. Imagine if every single person listening brought in even just one more person.
Suddenly, you've doubled your listeners. Okay, I'm convinced. This simple ask is powerful. But what about other calls to action? Should we completely ditch things like newsletter signups or asking people to support us on Patreon?
Not at all. Those are still real precisely. It should feel like a natural part of the listening experience, not an interruption. We want these calls to action to feel like a friendly suggestion, not like we're trying to sell them something.
It's funny, right? We make things so complicated when we're trying to grow, but sometimes the best solution is the simplest one.
It's true.
And this whole deep dive really proves it.
It reminds us that success in podcasting, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about connecting with people authentically. And who better to get the word out than the people who already love what you do, your listeners.
I love that. This conversation has really opened my eyes. I have a whole new perspective on calls to action. And I know our listeners are going to feel that too. That one simple ask can really make all the difference.
100%. Don't forget, you've created something really special, something that resonates with people. Trust that your listeners will be excited to share that with others.
So if you're out there making a podcast, here's something to think about. We've heard it straight from the source that even the most established podcasts with huge audiences, they still believe in the power of a simple ask. What if you tried phrasing that ask in your own way, with your own personal touch?
I think you'll be amazed by the difference it can make.
You might just be surprised. And on that note, happy podcasting, everyone. We'll see you on the next deep dive.